What's
Dan.
going on?
All
Can you
good.
hear me?
Yeah.
Good.
Um,
Good, man.
I like is this a new backdrop? Is this a new place?
No,
Oh, it's LA. It's the office.
no.
Okay. Well, I won't inquire further. Um, but cool, man. Did you see the Don Lemon interview?
No, I don't have time to watch Don Lemon talk. I think I saw like a clip on Twitter.
Yeah, it's so bad it's good. It's like so hilariously insane. Yeah, Don Lemon is basically like uh, grilling Elon on his thoughts on great replacement theory, on if Elon's a racist, on why he doesn't like he shows him individual tweets of like anti-Semitic, or a guy with a big nose or whatever, and he's like, why isn't this banned? And Elon's like, if it's illegal, I'll take it down. Um, and anyways, the whole Elon handles it really well, and then Don does a separate interview with Kara Swisher where he's like, um, you know, was Elon struggling because I'm a gay black man? Like, is Elon race? The interview is actually called "Is Elon Racist?" And
What does Kara Swisher say?
um, she says that he is kind of she has the perennial like disapproving mother look. So she says he's not racist, but he's insensitive and he's a right wing and he's a tech bro and he doesn't. They're both insulted because Elon said like, because they keep grilling. Don was grilling Elon. He was like, "Why do you keep doing these antics? Like, aren't you worried about, or aren't you annoyed at like having to deal with reporters like me who, you know, call truth to power or whatever?" And he's like, "I don't have to deal with any reporters. Like, I'm just talking to you because you were going to be on the X platform, but I don't have to talk to anybody. I don't have to defend anything that we do." And Kara took that as an insult because oh, you think you're too good for me? You think your time is more valuable than mine? Shocked at the idea that Elon's time might be more valuable than Don Lemon or Kara Swisher. So
Let's just like hone in on that point. In 2024, that is the correct take, right? And we had this whole thing with Lulu this week with like go direct, and we could talk a little bit about that. But you do not need to use reporters
yeah,
at all. They are downstream of you. If you have an audience, and obviously Elon has a massive audience, he owns the platform, but he also has 150 million followers and control of the algo. So, and I think we've talked about this on the pod before. It's better than any newspaper. Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post for whatever he bought it for. He has all of those people hate him and everything that he stands for, and so he can't get any of their approval. Elon bought Twitter, fired 70% of the people that hated him. The people who remain, whether they like him or are willing to tolerate him, that is beside the point, in that he has an organization of allegiance there. And the other important thing is he doesn't need he doesn't have reporters, right? Like the Washington Post, in order for it to actually be meaningful, has to actually produce the content.
right.
And in the case of Twitter, it's, as he likes to use the term, it is a platform. And the editorial value on the platform are mostly in the algorithm. And then obviously the thing we love to give Shreem a hard time for is the trending section, which is kind of a dumpster fire. It's gotten less woke since Elon's owned it, and it's usually just like sports and celebrity stuff, a little bit of news, like whatever the Royals are doing. Um, I guess that's celebrity, but just to go back to the Kara, she's irrelevant. It's over.
Yeah,
Like,
it's so over.
people needed the journalists in tech. Like I think some people know this. I worked at TechCrunch in college, like for Michael Arrington. He was not friendly with Kara Swisher even at that point, but that's 2009. Social media was not enough at scale, so you needed the outlets and traditional media at that point, because not everyone was online, and so to get the word out, you needed that for distribution. Everyone is online now, and so if you have a good presence on Twitter, on Instagram, on TikTok, on YouTube, like what do you
Yeah, a few before COVID, Balaji once said something like, "You could build a unicorn company never talking to a journalist. And at the time, it seemed like a little bit of an exaggeration. Or maybe it was 2018 or something. But now it just seems like a fact. Like, or it just seems like, yeah, you actually never really have to talk to journalists unless you're in some heavily regulated industry, or you think, especially if it relates to the government or something, and they read sort of what traditional media says. But if you're just building a thing and selling it to customers, like,
We've made a lot of progress with Farcaster, not unicorn
yeah,
by any means, but I think that uh, I didn't talk to a journalist until this February, and I did it because I thought it was the right move to flood the zone around frames, to really boost
yeah,
awareness around frames. So I finally responded to some journalists that were reaching out, and
but
I
you did,
chose the ones that I wanted. So anyone who's going to try to kind of lob gotcha questions, not that there was really anything gotcha around frames, but I had 100% of the leverage. So it was strictly I chose to give the interview there,
yeah,
but I did a bunch of podcasts, and then obviously this podcast, and a Twitter presence, and then obviously I'm building my own social media platform that's much smaller. But so just go direct, right? Like our fundraise announcement in 2022, I did it on my personal blog. Like I just took a screenshot and threw it on Twitter.
yeah,
Most people didn't click through to the blog; they just read the screenshot on Twitter,
yeah,
and that got out there, got reported on, right? So the journalists at this point, and crypto at this point, I think is tough because it's such a brutally competitive space for the trade specific publications there. But like you write a tweet or a cast now. I mean, Vitalik casting on Farcaster that generates news,
yeah,
and people are going to cover it like that. There are other people who are not as online, so they're going to consume the media through more traditional outlets. Although that viewership, I think, has definitely gone down. But
yeah,
I'd much rather spend the time I would do an interview doing a podcast that group of people, albeit it could be small, but doing something like Bankless, that's a huge number of people who are selecting into a podcast that is about crypto, and the interviewers are generally, I think, more knowledgeable about what's happening in the space, because it's like specific media. They tend to be more independent. They have to compete on that sense because they don't have a big platform. And I think that the other thing is they're just not hostile.
yeah,
So you don't have to be a sycophant. Like you can actually ask questions. I did one with Laura Shin, for example, who I at this point don't consider like a traditional media journalist. She has her own company, and she just did an interview in crypto this week with the 3AC, kind of
yeah,
fraudulent founder guy who's on the run. Um, what is his name? Kyle Davies.
yeah.
And she toasted him, but he chose to go on that podcast, right? So it was like that is to me a much better version of the world where Laura earns like people onto her podcast for being like her questions were really sophisticated when I went on
Yeah.
relative to most of the people's interviews. And so like Kara Swisher at this point, she's so, and obviously within her field, she's had a lot of success. She was writing an op-ed column for the New York Times, like that, nothing gets bigger. Right. And I think she's not like willing to do the hard work and like actually come to a point where she's meeting readers and listeners with an informed perspective. She's coming with her, manufactured or kind of like predetermined agenda.
Yeah, because yeah, back then it was about just like getting information other people didn't have and then having the distribution to do it. And now people, to your point, don't need a middleman to share the information. They can just share the information directly. And so now, in order to have a voice as a media person, you actually have to have a perspective. You actually have to have Ben Thompson, right? Like you actually have to be someone who people want to hear what they think about an issue or a topic. And
Wait, hold on. I hear Antonio knocking behind you.
I'll get him in one second. But before he like, but let me just finish the quick point, which is she doesn't do the work in terms of actually understanding the tech. And this is where like the media shifted from like explaining the new iPad to defending democracy because it feels better for them to feel like it feels more important to be like, oh, what about this misinformation thing as opposed to actually like what's happening in AI, and how does that affect big tech, and how does that affect startups, and like really contribute to sort of the knowledge base that people like Ben Thompson, Packy, Lenny, all these people are doing.
Firewires.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
hopefully
look,
us.
Trump broke media's brain, right? Like it turned into everything. It became political, especially within tech. Let me turn the light on. What is this outdoor podcast?
Yeah, there's like birds and shit. I don't know how good it's gonna be for the sound quality. So
You're good.
it's my birthday this weekend, and then Apurva,
Wow.
who's the unnamed mystery girlfriend, did this thing where she booked some Airbnb in the middle of the country, and I'm of course hating it because I hate life and people and everything. And so I'm sitting here in front of this.
So European of you, Antonio. You're out in your country place.
Yeah, I mean, if I could actually afford a country place, that would be a true allegation, Dan. But yeah, here I am listening to the birds in the middle of nowhere outside of Placerville, California, where what happened in Placerville? Gold was discovered. A placer is actually a gold deposit in a river, and this is where the whole Sutter's Mill business, which got kicked off this whole party in 1849.
The downtown is really beautiful. It's like preserved. It's really worth stopping on your way to Tahoe.
Like I would ever go on the way to Tahoe to check out the POW, Dan.
Wait,
no, I'm not going to Tahoe.
You went to Tahoe last summer, and you were like tweeting that you were taking mushrooms.
No, and the reason why is because I had a house out in the sticks, living with real Americans, not fucking skiing in the high desert outside of Reno, getting my American-made Jeep Wrangler encrusted with real American mud. None of this off-piste skiing bullshit.
Antonio, if Spindle becomes a massive success and you 100x your wealth, you won't be able to have the moral superiority that you benefit from now of claiming to be, hanging out.
It's going to get even worse.
Artist is how Antonio likes to be.
I mean, look at it this way: did Mackenzie Bezos' divorce settlement, help her humility about the world? Did it make her slightly, or did it in fact?
No, she's the new Ford Foundation.
Yeah. She is basically.
She's giving away $16 billion.
So someone sat me down and was like, "Why don't Elon why is there no right wing Mackenzie Bezos? Like, why is there no?
What would you fund?
Firewire? I'm just like that's a right question.
Firewire doesn't require $16 billion.
Right wing Hollywood.
Who would be talented enough to write for right wing Hollywood?
Courtesy Arvin.
That's the thing, right? We've had this debate before. Like, why do right wing aesthetics suck? Why is it the fucking pillow guy, and like why are they embarrassing, basically, right? Like that's part of the problem. The right wing has an aesthetic problem.
And a skill. It's a skill issue. Like to be artistic and talented, you're probably left leaning at least. And I mean, obviously, we've hollowed out any version of like the trades and the craftsmen in this country, right? If you go to any new construction site in Los Angeles for any type of home, who are all the people doing the like fine millwork and stuff? They're all from Mexico. Like they're not.
Wait. Hold on, Dan Romero is being a nativist here.
No, but my point is that we Americans are too lazy to do this work. They got sold on getting a communications degree from some terrible liberal arts school and going $200,000 in debt rather than going to a trade school. It's like being a carpenter or like a woodworker is a valuable thing in society, right?
I agree with you, but the flip side of that, everyone who says that, Dan, let's be realistic. You have children. If your son came up to you and said, "Daddy, I want to grow up and become an HVAC technician," how would you react to that?
Well, my son is turning 3, so I think we have a ways to go before
it's never too early to start, dude. Give that kid a wrench.
But the thing is like, I actually, no, I reject that. I think ultimately I care that my kid would be self-sufficient. Okay.
Right.
And I think that if that is what they chose to do, great. Be excellent at it. Be a good, upstanding person. I think what makes it challenging is the media and culture makes that there was never any celebration of it to begin with, but now it's actively looked down upon is somehow that you're treated as a failure if you go into a trade, right? And that it's like, the kids I went to high school with who didn't go to college and then became electricians, they like were able to buy a house. Like I seeing him at high school reunion, they're doing really well. And the kids who went to college to just play this game that's designed for like a very small elite group of people, and they went and they got a communications degree, and now they work at like Enterprise Rent-A-Car. It's like, okay, like maybe take the money that you spent for 4 years partying and mostly drinking and put that in a 401k or a down payment on a house. It's like it's a total misallocation of resources by a group of people because they've been sold a narrative that everyone should go to college and that's the path to success.
Dan, if your kid wants to major in English and
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Mistake,
you can pay for your own college if you want to major in English. I think it's like a stupid thing that I majored in English, and it's like learn an actual science. Like if you basically like there is no objective truth in the thing that you're studying in college, you're $0 for me.
Amazing.
I was going to present it as a trade-off, Dan, of like the kid shows up and says, I want to be an HVAC technician versus go and get an ethnic studies degree. And like, you're putting a wrench in that kid's hand, like within a second.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like ultimately I want my children to be able to choose what they want to do in life and find a fulfilling and meaningful path in life. But funding like a woke education is not on my plan.
What do you do if your kid turns into a shit lib? So this is a real thing that happens, right? Like
this is why you move to the sticks, right? Like you get out of LA, none of this stuff. Like I probably have what, I don't know, 5 years, 6 years before they really start to get indoctrinated in whatever is in the water in LA. So yeah, maybe I'm living in Placerville.
Hey, we'll continue our interview in a moment after a word from our sponsors.
Quick math. The less your business spends on operations, on multiple systems, on delivering your product or service, the more margin you have and the more money you keep. But with higher expenses on materials, employees, distribution, and borrowing, everything costs more. So to reduce costs and headaches, smart businesses are graduating to Netsuite by Oracle. Netsuite is the #1 cloud financial system, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, HR into one platform. That's one source of truth. With NetSuite, you reduce IT costs because NetSuite lives in the cloud with no hardware required, accessed from anywhere. You cut the cost of maintaining multiple systems and improve efficiency by bringing all your major business processes into one platform, slashing manual tasks and errors. Over 37,000 businesses have graduated to NetSuite, so do the math and make the move. Now through April 15th, NetSuite is offering a one-of-a-kind flexible financing program. Head to netsuite.com/zen. netsuite.com/zen. That's netsuite.com/zen. Hey everyone, Erik here. At Turpentine, we're building the first media outlet for tech people by tech people. We're the network behind the show you're listening to right now. We have a slate of hit shows across a range of topics and industries, from our AI and investing cluster of podcasts to shows that drive the conversation in tech with the most interesting thinkers, founders, investors, and influencers, like Econ 102 with Noah Smith. We're launching new shows every week, and we're looking for industry-leading sponsors. If you think that might be you and your company, email me at erikaturpentine.co. That's ERIK at turpentine.co, and let's partner together.
Antonio, do you have a perspective? People asked us for father advice, so this is very specific kind.
Oh, God. I'm like, Danny is a perfectly happy, normal individual. I'm like the anti-advice. So these are like the two poles of the both accepting and then accepting. I think it was it Aquinas that like the best way to get to heaven is to know the road to hell and avoid it. So I'm going to give you the second map. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I would avoid the woke industrial complex, I guess. I don't know, but my kid just moved to France, so that's my bet on that. That the French are going to the French
but like a French lefty is like a tolerable lefty.
It's Marxist.
They're not woke.
Yeah. It's economical.
It's Che Guevara, not Nicole Hannah-Jones, which oddly is more digestible somehow.
Yeah, there's logic to that. I see that. In an AI world, maybe that could happen.
Oh my God, I really got pissed off. He's wearing a Che Guevara t-shirt, but when he whipped up the New York Times, that's when I really flipped out on my son.
Yeah, it's funny. Martin Gurry, who's a friend of ours, friend of the show, he gets in his in public fights with his son, who about
Oh God,
politics.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, his
yeah.
his son is like a Marxist or commie, and he's always posting commie shit. And Martin gets in there and just like refutes. They get in public spats about it, and I'm like, oh no, it must be so hard to have a
Let
commie
me let me
son.
revise my statement. I was thinking about this after kind of the quip is if the kids want to be commies, at least be smart commies.
Yeah, yeah,
Like the worst kind of commies are dumb commies,
yeah, yeah,
right? Like like actually have done the reading, like be able
yeah,
to really intellectually engage, be able to argue the other side, you know,
yeah, yeah.
be able to argue Burnham better than Burnham, and then Marx as good as Marx. Like that, if you want to be a communist, then I'll at least intellectually respect you in the sense that you have decided to go down this path while deeply understanding the alternatives.
There was this funny Reddit thread. Maybe I shared this with you or on the podcast before, where this dad discovered this new strategy and he wanted to share it with other people. Where basically his daughter came up to him and said, or maybe it was his son, I can't remember. So it was his kid came up to him and said, "I'm trans now." But he knew that the kid wasn't trans. He sensed that it was some sort of social contagion. So he said, "Great, you're trans. I'm going to be trans too." And he like cross-dressed and he came to school. He brought his son or whatever, his kid to school. And the kid was so horrified. He was like, "No, you're embarrassing me, Dad. I'm not trans. I won't do it anymore." And it was just, the symbolism is the idea that, bring it back to politics, like often kids try to rebel from their parents. And so if they know that their parents hate commies, maybe they'll want to be a commie, which is all to say, if they're commies, maybe like, all right, son, let's go read Marx, let's and so maybe that they won't rebel.
But I think that's a good point, right? Like I can say this on the podcast, and maybe he's going to dig this up with his AI assistant in 6 years or 7 years. He'd be like, "Why did you say this on this podcast?" But I think allowing people to come to their own set of beliefs and exposing them to a wide variety of ideas, um, that is the best antidote, right? Because if you try to prescribe it, then I think you're going to get a much more shallow belief system. And I mean, my own experience, I felt like I had a very shallow, like uh, cartoonish conservative bent in high school. And then I think tacked much more left in college. And I think only in the last few years that I kind of revert to probably where my natural state is, but also with a lot more basis because I was exposed to other smart people independently, and I was able to kind of come to my own conclusions. I don't know. I'd be curious, Antonio, where do you think you got your set of political leanings?
Dude, growing up as the son of Reagan Republicans in Miami in the 80s, that shit was lit. Are you kidding? I was out there. There's like a photo of me with like shooting a rifle with like a, Reagan Bush 1984 shirt as like a little 7-year-old in the fucking Everglades. It's like, it's hard to tack from that back into pure on Marxism. It's a little difficult.
Yeah, but you're like living in the International House at Berkeley, like speaking
Yeah.
French, reading the pre-Grand.
Yeah.
Like, come on, like that doesn't like you don't just get
Mm.
exposed to the Reagan radiation and then all of a sudden do that.
It's I'll just say, I'll say what Bernie. It's funny. I saw the whole Ben and Jerry thing. I'll say what Bernie said about guns. A rifle in Vermont is different than a rifle in Chicago, or whatever comment that got him into trouble, right? A book of Marx in Paris is very different than a book of Marx in Berkeley in terms of what it actually does. The French Marxists still have a cheese course after dinner and shit like that.
I think American Marxists also have cheese courses.
Yeah. Although, I mean, the possibilities for collectivism, I think, in Europe is a little bit higher than the United States. I mean, socialism is never going to work in any real, not in any real sense in the United States. I mean, you've got LARPy socialists. You don't have any real socialists in the United States. You actually do have real socialists in Europe, and it maybe kind of sort of works, but not really. But I don't know. It's just different.
Well, lest we get tacked into the Europe conversation one more time, let me segue into someone who's definitely not a Marxist, Napoleon. Dan, you saw what was your review?
Well, so I really like Ridley Scott. I mean, Gladiator is like one of my all-time favorites. And so when I first heard that he was going to be doing Napoleon, one of my other favorite directors, Stanley Kubrick, that was the greatest movie never made. Like he was going to make a Napoleon movie, and it didn't happen. And so and, you know, Napoleon is like one of the historical figures that I think is most interesting. And so I got really excited. And then Antonio saw it the first day it came out, and he just like vomited in the group chat with just like this whole. He's like, I need to go cleanse myself with like reading some French biographies of Napoleon because this was so like British and terrible.
Yeah.
I just like stopped. I didn't go to watch it. I was just like, oh man, like I can't go watch something. And I finally gave in the other day on a plane, and it was awful, awful. They took, you know, one of the, I don't know, 10 most famous leaders in all of history, and they turned him into this like snivelly, you know, not charismatic. Like it blows my mind. Like, I don't know, Antonio, you're more of a Napoleon buff than even I am. Like in the sense that, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's amazing that they took one of the most interesting people in human history and actually made it kind of boring. Like the movie actually isn't that exciting. It's actually a little dull in parts. People complain that they made him into like a kind of cuck figure, which, by the way, he literally was. Josephine was cheating on him. And in fact, I remember one of the lines from his biography and Roberts' biography is that it was more embarrassing to be a cuckold than an adulterer. So he started cheating on Josephine merely to sort of reset the balance. And so he actually cheated on Josephine many times. The other thing I would say is that what's bad about the movie is that even someone who's actually read more than one biography of Napoleon, it's actually hard to follow what the hell is going on. And in like each of the various battles, you don't quite understand what's going on. And the problem is that, of course, he was in 50 or 60 battles, everywhere from Egypt to, you know, the furthest reaches of Russia. And you don't really get a coherent picture of what on earth is actually going on. The beginning of the movie is actually pretty good. It shows the initial unstable stage of the French Revolution and how he took advantage of that chaotic moment to actually rise to power. So like the first, I'd say 20 to 30 minutes actually aren't that bad. But it becomes a little bit of a confused mess by the end. And yeah, I'm not a big fan.
Yeah, and I think like there would be a version where, I mean, because, you know, people even talked about the battles, and I thought the battles weren't even that good. Like, and I think this is the other thing, and maybe this is a taste thing, is I just think that if you're gonna do battles, it's just so hard to compete in 2024 if it's not just like groundbreaking, because you're gonna see the CGI. It's just not gonna feel that grand. And I think like I was reading some Reddit comments afterwards, and one sense I had from it. So you have the Battle of Waterloo at the end, and yeah, they try to make it this epic battle, but you can see only like 1,000 or 2,000 people, and you're talking about a battle that had hundreds of thousands. Like the whole thing with the Napoleonic Wars is they were mass scale war for the first time. Is like basically the preview of the World Wars, and you don't get any of the you know, the grand scale of basically what you get is at the end you get this kind of like epilogue of like how many battles he fought and how many people died as a result of the battles that he fought in. And it's like, okay. It's just frustrating. I actually think like a better movie would just be you don't show any of the battles and you only show the political animal of Napoleon, or like Napoleon in Paris basically governing, and then the campaigns are, you know, frankly a less interesting component of like how was he dealing with being emperor and this French elite that kind of was tolerating him and didn't really like him, and obviously there were plenty of people who wanted to get rid of him, and as well as like more of the political machinations that are happening in Austria and Russia, in the UK, of like, what, we got to get rid of this guy, like he's a threat. You know, like they show the invasion of Russia, it's like you don't even have a sense for that he blockaded all British trade for the entire continent. Like it was just like, oh, Russia pissed me off, so now I'm going to go invade them. Yeah, I just you lose so much of the richness of the story, and I guess maybe you get spoiled with TV now, right? It's like Napoleon's life should be a 3-season HBO show, or, you know, 5-season HBO show, and it's like, you know, early life, rise to emperor, and then downfall or something, you know? I don't know.
Yeah, I agree though. I mean, the battle scenes are a little disappointing. As you said, like the Battle of Austerlitz, which is the one in the middle that had over 150,000 people, and it made it feel like it was a small skirmish between like two battalions or something, and it was a much grander affair, right? And how did you even organize an army of 100,000 people before obviously any wireless or anything? It was literally messengers running around, and yeah, the grandeur of that they don't actually get into it. And then the administrative state part, which is mostly how he's remembered in France, right? He created the modern nation state, right? The notion of a centralized nation with fixed borders and a school system. And he was a total micromanager. He had tens of thousands of letters that have survived of him getting involved in the most detailed shit you could possibly imagine. How could this man even keep in his head the thought of invading Russia and at the same time worried about garbage collection in Paris or something? And yet somehow he was capable of that. Yeah.
But, like it's so clear to me if Napoleon was here today, he'd be a Twitter addict. The guy would be terminally online despite doing all these things. He'd be like Trump or Elon, like in the sense that he'd be in charge, but he'd be just consuming all. He's a voracious reader. Like you don't get any of that part of him. They kind of turn him into this guy. He's like obsessed with having a kid. And it's like I don't. Yes, that's part of it, but there's so much more of kind of like what he's like. You read the Roberts biography, and they focus on so much of how like petty he was in terms of where he was from in Corsica. The beginning of the revolution, he was on the outs, and then he like shows back up and somehow like convinces his way to not be considered a deserter, and then like turns himself into a general. Like this guy is clearly like one of the all-time greats in terms of just like political manipulation and scheming, and they just make him just seem like a total wet piece of cardboard.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned he was a Corsican nationalist, right? Who kind of, in many ways, revolted against the Central French state. It was kind of not only was he a deserter, he was also kind of a traitor, and yet somehow he managed to actually integrate himself back into the French military system, which is crazy.
And he didn't even speak French well. Like it's just like he's
spoken with an accent.
France, and like he his whole life he's conscious of the fact that he has an Italian accent speaking French.
To your point on Twitter, it's interesting to think about like historical figures and if they lived today, and it often seems that they would be just terminally online, getting shit posting, getting in Twitter fights all the time.
Well, I think one thing that, and I think it's unfortunate, but at the same time, it's just reality, is Trump has exposed the go to direct as a politician is the winning formula. And I think AOC is the other side of that coin, right? Whereas like contrast to even Obama, like everything Obama puts out is just kind of like, totally controlled by his team, milk toast. Like you're not getting an authentic version of Obama, even as a post presidency. Everything that comes out of Trump online is Trump, right? Like it and so I think that there's this aspect of at least 2024 being terminally online is extremely populist, and so the great populists in history would be thriving right now, right? Julius Caesar or an Octavian would be doing really well with the plebs, and like they would be memeing, and like that is the way to get attention, and attention is power, right? And I think that is there's this kind of 20th century slow media elite that does not like the fact that the populace can go direct now, right? Like they like the intermediation because that created power for them and access and status.
And Napoleon was, of course, a populist, right? The famous scene, which is actually captured relatively well in the movie, in which on his march back when he fled Elba and came back, and they sent out a unit of men to arrest him, and he literally opens in jacket and says, "Who would fire on his emperor?" And they all flip, come to his side, which is just, it's almost Trumpian in its sort of narcissistic sort of self-absorption. But yeah.
Any Dune commentary worth remarking?
What, the movie?
Yeah, Dune 2.
I mean, I'm. It's funny. I'd only read it in high school, and like I don't know if it like really clicked for me, but I'm gonna go reread it when I have time. And I mean, I think the movies have really just like have me wanting to like. I actually haven't read any of the later books. Like I kind of only have a little bit of the lore through Wikipedia or whatever, and so I'm excited to actually go deep on Dune at some point. just to kind of like, I think the memes have made it really good. And then obviously the filmmaking is excellent. Sicario is one of my favorite movies of all time, and so Denis is, I mean, he's the Stanley Kubrick of our time, right? Or him and Nolan, like I think are the two like premier filmmakers, and like anything they make is going to be good. He's by the way, speaking of which, he's working on a Cleopatra project. Unfortunately, Zendaya is going to be Cleopatra.
Well, I was about to bring up Zendaya
Absolutely
because not to get too academic here, but it is interesting. If people who think Zendaya is really attractive, let's say if you think she's hotter than Sydney Sweeney, then
neither of my type.
Then you're definitely left wing, right? Like, it is interesting how sort of beauty, there's no right wing Zendaya fans, right?
Where do you get that, Erik?
My citation needed here, Erik.
Yeah. Who do you think you're talking to? Do you think you're talking to like Shriram or someone like who actually knows this stuff?
No, like people follow the discourse, and
hey, I was up to date on the royal discourse. I really thought Kate had been disappeared. Turns out she has cancer. It's like pretty grim.
I'm not up to date, but I'm intrigued at how beauty definitions can become so politicized. And I think it's the same left-right dynamic, which is what is true and what is real versus what would be great or what would be ideal, sort of the idealism realism divide. And
I love that. I love that Sydney Sweeney has somehow re-anchored our political spectrum, according to you, Erik. Which you're probably right, but I just refuse to do that.
Beautiful women, but you can have like a type in terms of like what you think is more beautiful than not, right?
Okay, here's my take on the Dune thing. I saw Dune. It's beautiful. One thing I found interesting. Two things. One, it's weird how the Fremen are obviously are like the Arabs, and it's in the current context. It's interesting to project our current dialogue on them kind of exoticizing the Arabs, and then of course House of Treaties. It's basically Lawrence of Arabia with worms, right? Is what this thing is. In that it's like this outside character who comes and leads them, which is kind of interesting. Which nothing wrong with that. I like Lawrence of Arabia. The other thing that I think is interesting, this is one of my pet like hangups, the messianic nature, right, of this, of like Paul supposedly being the sort of Jesus Messiah figure that they all believe in, and then of course, but he's kind of ironic about it, right? It's apparently this Bene Gesserit propaganda that they've been putting out for centuries and apparently all this planning, by the way, is just hinges on a knife fight between the two candidates at the end, right? They're basically betting on both House Harkonnen and then this. But in any case, whatever, it's like. He's very aware that this whole messianic thing is this total brainworm, which I think it is, by the way. Which, by the way, we can blame this on the Jews, by the way. They invented this in the Hebrew Bible. The notion that the Messiah is going to come and set the world aright, right, is this bizarre brainworm that we've all been living with for the past 3,000 plus years, I guess. When was the book of Isaiah written? 500 or 600 before Christ or something, whatever. 2,500 years in which this whole... The messianic figure is such an incredible thought. And I don't know why I think of Brian Johnson when I think of new messianic Jesus figures promising everlasting life.
Well, let me announce on this podcast that we have Brian Johnson coming on as a guest in just a few weeks. So it'll be a great interview. Antonio's biting at the opportunity.
I'm buying the Botox already. I just want the instructions of how to inject it. I just want diagrams.
Exactly. Let me quickly read Aella's tweet reaction.
Oh my God, this is going downhill fast.
Again, not to get too ivory tower. She said, "Just saw Dune. In the books, Fremen are polygamous. Chani probably grew up seeing men have multiple wives and thinking of that as normal. But no, gotta yeet that for yet another monoplot to add to the 99.9% of monogamous stories that homogenize our popular fiction." Guys, are we going to stand for this injustice?
Well, so I think like the if I remember correctly, he kills this guy Jamis or whatever, and then in Fremen culture you inherit their family. Like, and I think it's like technically she becomes his wife. This is not Chani or whatever, but he chooses to like basically protect them. And then I want to say she remarries someone else in the book or whatever, but they cut that out of the movie completely. I was not a fan of Zendaya's character because I think it changed it like made it more political commentary of like the messianic figure thing. But I actually saw an interview with Denis, and I think and this is why I want to go read Dune Messiah, which is the second book. He wrote her character in to be a little more useful to the story, to really start to highlight Paul's path towards being a Messiah is a bad path. But I think similar to The Social Network, I don't actually think like the average reader or watcher took that away. Like, the whole point of The Social Network is to make Mark Zuckerberg look kind of bad. And instead it like encouraged a whole bunch of people to quit Wall Street and go work on Silicon Valley and apply to YC. I think the same thing here is like, I think a lot of people are like, oh, Paul Atreides is the new Luke Skywalker. This is pretty awesome. And I think like it's Paul Atreides is probably more akin to Darth Vader, right? Like a chosen one who goes on the wrong path and brings balance to the Force. One thing about Dune that now it's on screen, it's so obvious how much stuff that George Lucas just like stole from Dune and then from Foundation. So he just like took the two preeminent science fiction and then he just kind of like merged them together to create a story. And obviously there's his own thing. And then he has a lot of stuff from Kurosawa as well. But everything's a remix, right? And so it's like George Lucas was smart enough to take those elements and actually make a story that made him a lot of money.
Can I drag this conversation to the gutter for just a second? And that's just a very basic question.
I was going there too. Please.
Do the Fremen poop? I mean, never mind the fact of having to get off that damn suit to actually do it.
It goes right into the still suit.
No, well, the urine I assumed obviously did so, but the poop, how does that work?
Yeah, they have like a whole, I don't know, purifying system. They like avoided that detail further.
They're a lot less cool now that I realize it.
In the books. I should go back and look up the poop technology.
They look a lot less cool now that I realize they're basically wearing diapers. But okay, one other comment I'm going to make, which let's really rile up the Dune heads. I actually like the original David Lynch Dune version from 1984. I know everyone kind of shits on it now. Obviously, the production value is nowhere near what the current one is, which again is spectacular. But like the utter weirdness of the Dune universe, and it is deeply weird in some ways, I think was conveyed a little bit better in the previous version. Like Baron Harkonnen is way more disgusting actually in the first Dune than even this version, in which he's like this big kind of bald pudge ball. In the other one, he has this like horrible skin disease. He's like the most repulsive human you've ever seen in your entire life. And I don't know. I was watching some of the older scenes from Dune, and I have to say, I think they actually managed to stand up fairly well.
Yeah, I think that the other thing I would say with Dune is like it's the first movie. I didn't end up seeing Oppenheimer in theaters, so maybe that. Although having seen it in a theater, like it's just a lot of close-ups of people's faces, and I guess there's some of that at Dune, but like I think that there is still something to be said for a movie like Dune, where so much of it is the natural setting of the movie. It just looks amazing when you're in a theater and the sound and stuff like that. And so generally I would say like, Nolan movies work really well, but there's still a certain type of filmmaker that can actually make a movie that you want to drag yourself to a theater. And the other thing I'd say is, at least in LA, the theaters that are still left, they've definitely upgraded them. Like the AMC's, like the seats are way nicer. Like you can get food delivered. Like I think that Alamo Drafthouse kind of upped the game. And I think a lot of the more base theaters have gotten a lot better. But I mean, I can't remember the last time I saw a movie beyond Dune. Yeah. Right.
Well, but that's the flipping that's happening. Like, remember, the digital used to be the luxury good. Now the analog experience is the luxury good. Everyone has Netflix, right? But like going into like a nice place with a nice seat. I also saw it at the Metreon in SF, and it's like this easy chair with like good food. Like, what the hell? It's like this. Mind you, the tickets were like crazy expensive, but it's that's the thing. By the way, I'm going to run out of batteries out here. I'm going to run inside. Do you want me to do it now, Erik? And then like you just cut to me?
We'll say nasty things about you while you do that. And you can go back.
No, I'm going to keep it open because I don't trust you. So
run.
I'm going to do one of these.
Antonio, I can't believe you didn't see it VC subsidized. I mean,
VC.
Oh, VC subsidized all the VC Dune events or VC IMAX
I had a bad cold. No, I was going to go to Paradigms actually. I don't know if one of you guys were there. Some of my crew actually went. I didn't actually go. Apparently, Zach ran into Matt Wang, who was actually hosting the event.
I made a tweet because I got invited to like a bunch of these in SF, and I was like, "Are there any SF?"
Look at you, Dan, so popular.
Yeah, Are there any
What's the
SF
cut?
tickets left that aren't at a
Yeah.
VC screen?
I will follow
Laughing
up
at your own tweets on air, not actually that funny.
I want to follow up to the Aella comment with
Why always Aella? We were like every
hold
time you
on.
say Aella now, I just think of that chart.
Hear me out. This is a growing Daniel tweet.
Okay, Growing Daniel's good.
Yeah. He says, met the hottest polyamorous person yesterday. Easily a 4 out of 10. To which I reply, or I ask, why is that the case? Why are polyamorous people not attracted?
Did you actually reply that on Twitter, or are you asking rhetorically to us?
I'm asking to us. I didn't reply.
I don't know any polyamorous people, so I have no opinion.
But Antonio, weigh in. What is it about like attractive? Like, because people who are having, you would think that the people flooding the zone are attractive. That's why they're able to do that. But no, in fact, it's a paradox. Do you have any explanation here? I'll just take this part out of the podcast.
I'm not going to really talk about the physical beauty of polyamorous. I don't know. It's
okay. We'll take this part out.
I'm just against polyamory.
At some point, Erik, and they can answer all your questions.
I will come out and say I'm anti-polyamory because I think the whole thing is just ridiculous. You need to have the opposition of balanced opposites, right? The whole point of marriage is so that adultery is cool and edgy and transgressive and whatever. If you just make it legal, who gives a shit? Like it's just ridiculous, right? Like what's the fucking point of it? That's the whole point. That's why you also can't have a proper bohemian artist, etc., unless you have like a bourgeoisie that has a stick up their ass and is like conventional and boring, right? That's why you need those dual opposites. Polyamory is just like, wait, you're not in on the joke, like you don't get it. Like you're not actually supposed to stay sexually loyal until the marriage. There's supposed to be this transgressive other thing that actually keeps it spicy, and like it's like I don't know, it's like they're taking it at face value and not understanding what it is. But hey, guys, I'm the unmarried guy here. So, no, wait, are you married yet, Erik, or are you in a polycule, Erik? You moved to San Francisco. You're in a polycule. Admit it. You're in a polycule.
I would never.
You would never. That's famous last words.
I'll believe in polyamory when YC Demo Day has like a polycule management software company in which it's like a piece of SaaS software in which like it's just to sit there and manage the trysts and the child pickups and all the like the N squared communication that has to happen in a polycule of N people. One of these days, there's going to be an actual YC company that does this.
Well, there's this app Field that is basically for polyamory. I mean, it's
wait, how do you know about the polyamory?
How do you know? Guilty.
Because I'm God forbid, I'm not on it, but I have friends. who
have you onboarded to check it out for a potential investment?
Never. It's too niche.
Wait, so you're friends with polyamorous people, but you're not polyamorous yourself?
I'm not polyamorous myself.
So you're polycurious, is what you are.
I live in San Francisco, and I'm around these fucking degenerates. On the streets, in the sheets, just like everywhere.
Have you told your father about polyamory?
I like my boring life. I work and I spend time with my family, and that's it.
Same here, except with no family, but no polyamory. Let's segue into more wholesome conversation. Apple, Microsoft, seamless transition. A lot going on. Microsoft basically acqui-hiring, inflection, and kind of this sort of way to try to avoid any antitrust investigation, but it seems like they're effectively doing the same thing. Apple getting hit. Dan, any perspectives on either?
I just love how Erik's trying to be Jason. Like he's trying to do all in pod. Like let's change the topic. Let me throw the opener of the news, and then like let's try to get some hot takes.
World's best moderator, dude. I'm just trying to.
I mean, he's better than you. I mean,
totally. He's very good.
He's still just trying to avoid the polyamory charge. He's just trying to change the subject. Is what's going on. But anyway, it's okay. Let's talk about Apple. Go ahead.
Yeah. So Apple has now an antitrust case against them. Reading the commentary on it, it's going to be probably hard for the government to convince. They have 55% market share, and so the government's trying to say they have a monopoly when the definition of like if we're in performance smartphones, by the way. So it's like they're trying to like create a new category. I think it's going to be a really hard they're not even attacking the App Store stuff, right? All the stuff that we've talked about, or like, Tim Sweeney and Epic, the stuff that's happening in the EU, that's not even on the docket. It's all focused on like green bubble, blue bubble, and like making the Apple Watch work better. Tim Cook's comment, like buy your mom an iPhone. So I don't know. It feels like the government basically, they put the Lena Khan in and they said, take every single one of the big tech companies other than Microsoft and bring an antitrust case against them or an FTC type case against them. And I don't know, like they might lose every single one of them. The L in Lena Khan stands for lose.
Oh man. that was a joke inside one of the douchey rich guy group chats that you're in, right? Dan, that's what that sounds like.
I don't have any douchey rich guy.
No, other than the one that we're all in, by the way. But no, yeah, right. Interesting. So can I just be pedantic for a second, and can we define the regnant legal standard for antitrust in the United States and how it does or doesn't apply to Apple? Would that be relevant here, Erik?
Yeah, I think let's talk about Sherman.
Let's talk about Sherman. Right. So the Sherman Antitrust Act, written in 1890 or so, which was about railroads, which, that sounds funny to you, the leading crypto law regards orange groves, even wild alternative events. But that's a whole different thing that we'll get into hopefully in the next episode when we have a crypto event. If Dan doesn't drag his feet on it, you think it wouldn't be so hard to get the guy to lean into a crypto episode. That's a separate issue. The Sherman Antitrust Act, and the key thing about it is that it protects consumers from harm, right? And particularly in its later manifestations, like Robert Bork, the failed Supreme Court nomination, his whole thing was that, like, look, if the consumer isn't actually suffering, what's the point? Who cares? You can actually have cartels. Maybe cartels are good, actually, in that it actually delivers more efficient service to somebody. I don't know if that's the tack that Apple's going to take. The tack that they've traditionally taken is, for example, part of the whole, so there's a bunch of shit in this antitrust thing. I'm surprised how expansive it is, including crypto wallets, by the way, potentially. The fact that they actually impose a tax and you can't use crypto wallets. But one of the things is messaging. So there's like an app, Beeper, made by the guy who made the Pebble Watch, which precedes the Apple Watch, YC founder, who basically removes the stigma of the green bubble of shame from Android users. And so you can actually use messages on Android and not have the green bubble of shame, right? Which is a big deal in the United States, which, by the way, the AmeriPoors are so poor they can't afford a WhatsApp, apparently. They're still using the fucking text app, but whatever. Leave that aside. The problem is then Apple, the tack they take is, oh, no. We can't guarantee that Beeper is actually encrypting messages, right? So for the sake of our user safety and security and privacy, we have to control the entire messages experience. So I suspect the tack they're going to take, and they did this, by the way, on the ad side as well, and data and everything, is that for the sake of user privacy, we have to control every goddamn thing that happens on your phone. I think that's probably the tack that they're going to take. And it's weird because there's nothing in antitrust law that says the flip side. Oh, no, you can maintain a cartel if it's good for the consumer. That's not really a thing, but it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
So I think that the challenge with the Apple stuff is, so Dan, the app developer, like, I would love more open app store, like, let me do whatever I want, like, yes. But Dan, the smartphone user and potentially tech support for the rest of his family, absolutely not. Like, I don't want to deal with like viruses and malware and all this other crap that we grew up with on Windows PCs. I keep the iPhone clean. And I think the challenge with just like the logic here under consumer harm is, who's harmed? If you don't want to buy an iPhone, you can buy an Android phone. And there are a lot of cheaper Android phones out there. Oh, well, green bubble, blue bubble. So basically what you're saying is a social stigma is now grounds for a federal antitrust. Like, it doesn't reach the kind of like, should we be spending time on this threshold in my view? And like, I think there's plenty of stuff to go after Apple, but the other challenge is we do not pass laws in Congress that update these regulations. And so instead you have weird legal arguments by these regulatory, whether it's the FTC in the case of antitrust and DOJ, and then SEC and DOJ in the case of what's a security. It's like, well, why don't we just pass laws, right? Like, we talk about wanting to reform immigration. There's an immigration bill, or border security bill. It wasn't even an immigration bill. It was a border security bill on the docket in February. Trump's like, I don't want that to pass. Republicans don't let it pass because I don't want to give the Democrats a victory during election season, which that sucks because if you actually look at the bill, it's everything the Republicans wanted, but like they're playing like, okay, if we let more chaos happen, maybe it'll help us. And it very well could backfire on them. By the way, Democrats would do the exact same thing if there was an issue in their camp. One being in the midterms before the flippening of the House. They could have passed with a majority protecting federal right to abortion. Right? They could have overrode Dobbs with a federal abortion law, but they didn't want to spend the political capital on it. And it was good for campaigning. And so I think that like our political process is so broken in that we have these, like the only thing we got a bipartisan thing on is ban TikTok. Which even there, that bill is like, riddled with potential loopholes that could end up being used. I think David Sachs has actually done a good job outlining this, but it leaves a lot of leeway for people to basically say this other app is a danger, you need to divest and all that kind of stuff. And so I think the Apple thing is less interesting to me as much as like we clearly need updated laws in 2024. We should not be using a standard set in 1890 for railroads and a securities set of laws based on a 1930 something law and then a single Supreme Court case about orange groves as the basis for like regulating large swaths of the modern economy. And so I think that's why all these issues kind of just for me are just like they're really nothing burgers because it basically is just all just fought in the courts, which means it can change.
I mean, should we spend a minute on TikTok? Is there
Oh God, yeah, TikTok. Yes. Sorry, yes, bipartisan support. Everyone agrees TikTok should be destroyed. Yeah,
is there
that's
any cogent argument as to why it shouldn't be destroyed? Like Balaji, I think is actually quite sympathetic to it's funny, the Balaji Taylor Lorenz what's it called?
Horseshoe theory.
Yeah, horseshoe theory is that he thinks, he trusts Chinese or the CCP more than American Democrats, basically. Or he thinks they're both bad, but he thinks like, why is he sympathetic to not banning it? Because he thinks that it'll consolidate power among sort of like woke America.
I should go read Balaji's argument. I would imagine what it would say is you ban TikTok, then you ban like you just like you start this game of like anytime you don't like something, you get rid of it. I think the only crisp argument you can make about TikTok is that it's a national security thing to have a Chinese-based company and deep integration with the CCP. They'll deny that, but the reality is any company in China of sufficient size that has a deep integration with the CCP because they run the country should not be allowed to own a major media property, right? 170 million Americans or something use TikTok. That's in a prior era, that would be like the Soviets owning NBC. Like, no, just don't allow that. So ByteDance could be a minority shareholder. They could own 49%, but 51% of it should be owned by an American company. And they get compensated for that. So it's not ban TikTok, it's divest TikTok. But I actually think the reason it's being played as ban TikTok is actually good PR by the TikTok lobbyists and really trying to push the Senate is that resonates with people who use TikTok. Oh, I don't want to lose TikTok. The whole thing is not to lose TikTok. It's to say it can't be controlled by a company based in China. It could be an independent company. It can be a minority-owned company or something. But ultimately, it is a major media platform in the United States, and that should not be owned by our chief adversary. But put another way, if it was owned by the Russian government, would people say that it should be banned?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. If it's owned by Putin's, daughter's social media company, should it be like so part of this is like I think China still has enough supporters, especially within the kind of like American left, because it's become a Trump thing, so that you kind of get that. But like China is it's actually bipartisan throughout a lot of Congress, and Biden has been just as hard on China in many ways on the trade side of things. If you've looked at all the semiconductor stuff, and so I think that the only argument you can make is it's a divestiture bill. Should have never been allowed to make the acquisition in the first place. But that happened. They created a lot of value. It is an incredibly valuable thing. And in a world where you don't think that the CCP has access to the models or the data or whatever, it's just another social media app. It's no different than Instagram. Instagram Reels is basically TikTok, but
Yep.
we don't have an issue with it because it's an American-based company.
Why did
So
Vivek
compensate them for it. We're not Cuba. We're not nationalizing this. They are forced divestiture. In the same way that, by the way, China does not allow American social media companies to own Chinese apps. You can't run them in the country. They get banned.
Yeah.
You can't even operate. Sorry, you can't even operate an American app in China. I mean, that's the whole.
Yeah. So there's no reciprocity. So why are we allowing China to operate an app in the United States?
Because then we're no better than them, is what some people say, but that's silly.
That is a naive, geopolitics is about power and realpolitik and actual outcomes, not feelings.
Right. Or not principles.
Diplomacy is not even about feelings. Diplomacy is about outcomes. And so to give China your chief adversary that explicitly states. So here's an intellectually inconsistent opinion. The US government should not force divestiture of TikTok, but we should support Taiwan. Or we should support the Uyghurs. You can't have a la carte. You're either pro freedom and anti CCP, or you are for CCP. Pick your side.
Right. I saw that Vivek switched his side. He's doesn't want us to ban TikTok. Is that because Trump?
Who's paying him?
Who is paying him? I mean, Vivek has his own.
That's my question. Anyone who does not support the TikTok divestiture, not ban, divestiture, who are they being paid by?
I wonder if it's just a votes thing or young people thing. Who want young people to like you?
Who matters for votes?
Well, I don't
retirees. Know. They think China's bad. They watch Fox News and they
do 18-year-olds not matter?
In an actual federal elections, they don't matter.
Got it.
I mean, look at the bulk of the population. I think it's baby boomers and millennials. So yes, they are some percentage of the vote, but it is not the dominant.
Yeah. Okay then. Maybe we can.
So here's another way to frame this, because I think that there's some people who can do mental gymnastics, because again, it turns it into a Trump thing. I think a lot with TikTok, or a right thing. Should anyone be allowed to own a major social media app in the United States? So should Putin be allowed? Pick the Kim Jong. Should they be allowed? So the moment you say someone shouldn't, now we're just negotiating on who, right? If you are a true freedom maxi, then what's interesting is then you start to get a left person who horseshoe theories into being a libertarian or an anarchist.
Yeah. Let's wrap that topic. And maybe we should wrap the episode, unless there's anything else that you guys were excited to discuss. Maybe we'll just get a clean hour. Antonio, does it feel good to be 35?
Yes, it's wonderful to be 35. Although it's funny. Brian Johnson's whole thing is how he's aging slower, and his actual age is some mine is his is a discount, mine's a premium. But yes.
I don't know, Antonio. I think you've got that Blue Zone Brian Johnson anti-aging thing. It's every year you look a little younger.
I know it'd be funny as I know the Blue Zone thing, the Mediterranean diet with too much red wine and stuff. It'd
right,
be amazing if I actually outlived him.
I look at what you post on on Twitter of what you're eating all the time, and I'm like, hey, he seems to be kind of getting a little younger.
I need to exercise more. I could lose 20-30 pounds, but the diet side actually is not too bad. I could never eat the nutty putty or whatever the hell that guy eats that looks like bathroom caulking, but it's
not bad.
Yeah.
Wait, what?
I've had it.
No, of course he's had it.
Erik,
and then Travis has been to his house.
Oh, what about polyamory, or what about the blueprint diet? And then it's I've had the blueprint diet. I have friends that are polyamorous.
I've had the blueprint diet.
Too much exposure to being online, you start to actually, you start to blend in with the people who are actually too online.
Well, I did resolve after this 10-day retreat to spend less time online, more digital Sabbaths on the weekends. We'll see if I can follow through with that. But
look, it turns out the Bible was right, Erik. That's a conclusion from your little self-help seminar.
I'm now celebrating the Sabbath officially.
Right. So you go on this retreat, and you're citing esoteric Aella tweets to us. I mean, come on, like no one's believing you that you're less online. Like, yeah.
It's hard to fully go off, but
when you're starting from the base that you are, less online is still very online.
Yeah.
Can I make one last comment on the Aella thing? One thing I'll never forgive Aella for is what she's done to Sankey diagrams. You can never look at a Sankey diagram and not think about the guy who came in the fluffer. I mean, that's it. She's ruined an entire infographic forever. And in fact, I would like to popularize coming in the fluffer as a weird statement of everyday speech, like, oh yeah, he followed all the paperwork, he did all the thing, and then he came in the fluffer. Like he went through all the steps and then fucked it up in the end. I want that to become like a thing. Can we make that be a thing?
Yeah, I'm not going to use that kind of language. I find it absolutely disgusting and not to be used in polite company.
No, but it'll eventually get normalized. Do you realize the word dork used to refer to a penis? Like it used to be like a physical. And these things get sanitized as you use them. It doesn't mean the thing anymore. Guys, no one's going to know what a fluffer is when they start using it.
I'm going to bawdlerize all of the language that my children use. We're going to remove anything that is bad.
Yeah, they're going to be shit libs posting on Twitter about how their dad. Whatever. I'm just kidding. Humor me, guys. Our last question: if Aella,
just no. I don't know where that question's going. No. I'm just going to say no.
Why are
I'm just betting on no.
I'm thinking like about to have like a nice family evening and now have Aella like.
I guess the question
you've got fluffers in your head.
You can refuse to answer, but my question is, what's her legacy? Like if we're sitting here just reflecting on like what has Aella contributed to intellectual discourse. Like
lots of chlamydia. No, joking. It's like that joke. Remember in Bananas, the Woody Allen movie, when he's like the president of San Marcos, and he asks, "What's our biggest export?" And the guy goes, "Dysentery." Right? It's like, what's her legacy? I don't know. Chlamydia. All right. What else is there?
I think like here's what I'd say, Erik. If you want my honest opinion,
I'll share Vitalik's.
How about this? Someone willing to just say whatever they think outside the norms. I think it takes a ton of courage and. To have people like come back with like nasty comments and dunks and all that other kind of stuff. Like, I'm like pretty online. I'm willing to say, I think anyone on this pod, like we're willing to say what we say on this pod and then on Twitter. And I don't think any of us are even at the level of like total unfiltered, worry about not worried about being canceled for what you say. And so what I'd say is that level of intellectual honesty and freedom, that's admirable. Like, I think basically we have a bunch of friends who say a lot of interesting things in private, but when they go public, they have to, keep it back. Right. And they've got plenty of money. And so the fact that, there are people who are willing to do that and actually have that level of bravery. Maybe it's because they don't have anything to lose. And the other thing, maybe it's just like they genuinely don't care what other people think. And that's like a higher order level of being, right? Like you can just exist outside the matrix. So good for those people.
So I agree with you, Dan. And by the way, I'm pro Aella in general. I interviewed her once and actually like her as a person. And I agree with you that, by the way, I have no idea who could possibly be talking about Dan, by the way. Someone who says, one thing in public, another in private, and has lots of money, has nothing to fear. I can't even begin to imagine who we're talking about. But I do think to be that,
Antonio, I think there are a lot of people like that. Is what I'm trying to say.
No. There's not one person. Actually, there's a number of people. But I do think to actually truly do it requires a level of disagreeableness that like is tantamount to mental illness. Like I don't know that it's brave in the sense of like I know I'm going to be pilloried for this thing, but I say it anyhow. It's more like I'm about to say something so incredibly wild, and my brain is so bizarre I don't even realize how weird it is. And I think that might be the case for a lot of the people that fall into that room.
But and I think this is the challenge is if you can create an anon and get through that like part where you get the audience, then you have true freedom, assuming you don't get doxxed. Because I think part of the reason all these anons get doxxed is they want to tell people they have the anon because that's like, look how talented I am. I was able to create an anon. But if you could create an anon and keep it anon, then then boom, like you have that freedom. And on a platform like Twitter, you can build a massive audience.
Well, I think one reason people self-dox is also they want to transfer the social capital from their anon to their real life identity, so it helps them in the real world, whether with their job or going anywhere in person. It's like if you're famous in a forest, anyone hear it? What can you really? That's one reason.
One of the things that I'm really hopeful for with Farcaster is because you can use the ZK stuff. I have to run after this, but here's the shill. Because you can use the zero knowledge proof stuff and you can build your own client, you can have undoxable or close to undoxable anons if you have good OPSEC as possible, right? Because you could basically go totally direct to the protocol, and you never have to worry about some support person leaking your IP data or some weird, like you could really go all in. And there's also some clever stuff that you could probably do where you have a big following on Farcaster. You could cryptographically sign a proof to say, I have at least 50,000 or 100,000 followers on Farcaster. There's a small number of people who have that, but at least you have plausible deniability, and then you can just go off. And then so people are going to give more weight to that anon because they say, oh, for your face account, your like real account, you have enough social status that this probably is an account worth following. And so I'm optimistic that people are going to be able to do that with decentralized social media, not just Farcaster, because of cryptographic magic.
Yeah. Cool. Dan, I'll let you go. I'm going to briefly describe Aella's legacy to Antonio, but Antonio, you could also go, but I'm going to make sure the fans hear this. Aella has contributed a lot to the creator economy. She was one of the early...
What are you talking about, dude? The nutty putty has gone to your head. Okay.
No, she certainly popularized polyamory, which I'm trying to popularize monogamy, so I'm not on the same side of that. I think the one thing that she has done that I do agree with is basically what Dan said. I think she was early on the free speech stuff, or early on the anti-woke stuff in like 2020 when it wasn't okay or wasn't popular, and she took some blows for that, and for that I salute her. And then in general, you're gonna think this is ridiculous because it is ridiculous, but Vitalik said she's like a social version of EAC, or just like accelerate all social norms or something. And I think there's something there, but I also think it's kind of silly.
Hold on, but didn't she ban the EAC people from the gangbang?
Yeah,
it was one or the other.
Yeah, she banned.
Isn't that a little strange? She's on the EA side of the balance sheet, apparently.
She's the EA side of the AI argument.
So just to balance things out, the EAC people have to throw a gangbang too. I don't know who's going to be responsible for that, but someone has to get on that. Otherwise, it's fairly unbalanced.
In general, I'm not philosophically aligned with her, but I do appreciate her spirit, and I consider us friendly. I'm rooting for her, for her soul. I'm just kidding. I think she's great. Okay, with that's my take. This has been Moment of Zen. Always sophisticated, always what people need to hear. Antonio, until next week, or maybe next 3 weeks.
Yeah, let's get the crypto thing. Dan doesn't seem too pumped on it, but there's a number of people. I was thinking they can maybe show up for 10 or 15 minutes. I don't have to be there the entire show because a lot of them I think are not going to be that interesting from a media perspective. But it'd be kind of cool to get this parade of 5 or 6 people to talk about the state of crypto, because there is a lot of weird shit going on in crypto right now.
Let's do a state of crypto. Let's just make it happen. And also, Curtis wants to do an episode this Sunday afternoon. If you're around, come join. Or if you want to join, come join. If not, I'll just do it with him. But what's
the topic? Wait, is it going to be the same Curtis spiel as always, or what's the?
Well, we can grill him on anything. Let's have a conversation. He's his first episode crushed. It was one of the more popular ones. So it'll definitely get a lot of views. It got almost 40,000 views.
Somebody ran into me in GDC and said you should have Curtis on again, and this time you should show up or something. So
So come Sunday afternoon if you're around. But otherwise, this has been great, and
cool.
Until next time.
All right.